If you drove by, you wouldn't immediately see me pull down my pants, and I'm
Nice.
did not tell anyone. Got the ride home. I don't know if my cousin ever knew. I don't know if anyone at the party ever connected me to the incident, but I never heard anything about it again.
Cool. I mean, and now it's for everyone to see on the internet. Hey, hello, and welcome one and all to Guy's Trip, a podcast of the artist, for the artist, and by the artist. Today I have with me Dakota Wayne.
Hello, everybody.
And today, so Dakota is a composer, I would say also a poet, and an enthusiast of electronica. Any other titles that I might have forgotten?
Meat thrower, ghost maker, magic card enthusiast. One of my many roles I play.
Magic carp enthusiast.
Carp is a very good fish as well.
Yeah. Cool. So the format of this thing, this is the pilot episode. So we have no idea how it would go, but it should be fun.
Well, I want to say I'm very happy to be for the launch of Guy's Trip featuring Guy Ben-Tov.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've seen each other in almost 4 years, I think.
Almost 4 years, yeah.
So it's a happy reunion, and I'm happy to be on this pilot episode.
Yeah. Cool. So, like the rules of the format. We're basically going to be interviewing each other. I have prepared 5 questions. You have prepared 5 questions or more. We can prepare more, but we can only ask 5. Some ground rules. So if I'm asking you any question that makes you uncomfortable, you may reject this question, and I'll have a backup question.
Do I get a red button that when I press it goes, eh?
Since this is the pilot and I didn't get a red button, no, but this is a great idea, and I'll have it for next episode.
For the next episode, I think this is a very good idea.
Yes.
It really gets the effect of, I reject. Or a big hammer.
Ooh. Overruled. Exactly. You get to decide as the guest who goes first. If you ask me the first question, or if I ask you the first question.
Mm-hmm. Let me look over my questions for just a moment.
Yeah.
You know, the first question is important because it sets the tone for the whole evening or day, actually. You don't know what time it is, where we are. I'll let you set the tone.
Cool. So just for time's sake, let's say like the questions, like as I said when we discussed like prior to the episode, the questions can be like very vague. Like the idea is to open a discussion, right? So since each question can be like an extremely existential question that will lead to a 2-hour discussion, we're going to put a cap on each question. And once we get to the 10-minute mark, we'll just move to the next one. I don't have like a stopwatch that goes at the end. This is also a good idea for the next episode. So I'll just like keep time on my phone. And since we have so many people we know in common that we might be mentioning during this conversation, like I think an important ground rule is that if we're going to negatively mention anyone, we shouldn't mention them by name.
I never mention anyone negatively.
Okay. So.
Wait, I have one more question.
Yes.
Is there a limit on the amount of times I can reject a question? Like, is it like...
you can reject any question.
Pandora? But is like, do I have like 5 rejects and then I have to
you can reject,
accept for like 3 times and I get one more reject?
You can reject any question. Okay. This is a safe space.
Okay, it's not a credit system.
No, it's
Okay.
not a credit.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
reject it.
Okay.
Like you should reject, but like you should only reject the question if like answering it would make you uncomfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So first question, Dakota Wayne. How are you doing these days?
That's a very great question. Thank you. I would say pretty good. The first few days of 2024 actually have been an improvement. For the backstory, for people who don't know, I'm living in Switzerland now, pursuing more composition studies. And 2023, 2022 was quite difficult for me, I would say. I got to Switzerland and it's very expensive, and I was having a hard time getting projects and still not getting any money. And so I took on a job serving ramen. It was stressful, and but it's gotten better. 2024 has gotten better, I would say. So yeah, optimistic. Yeah.
If you want, I'll be interested in like hearing on about some of your hardships that
Sure,
like
yeah.
led to 2024, and maybe like what's the like what would you say is the main difference that makes the current times better than it was like a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the interest. Super nice. I would say the biggest event where, from first coming to Switzerland till now where I feel a bit optimistic was probably finishing my master in Basel, where I had to produce like a evening length concert of all my music. That's kind of the requirement for all the composers who do the masters there. The school books a room for you. It's a very nice, like old printing hall that's converted, kind of like an off space. You get equipment. You have to organize everything else. And this was huge stress for me because, like some big names in the new music scene are going to come. They're going to judge you. And I had previously some bad experiences presenting pieces there where I felt I was a bit unfairly judged, or maybe I misjudged the audience a bit even, and felt like I got a bit ostracized, or I felt like a bit of like a somehow not fitting in, or just I was super nervous on how people would see me, and nervous that I wasn't going to be able to make a career, blah blah blah. So I presented it. I almost had a heart attack that day because weeks and weeks of work and so much stress, and trying to put all of the technic together. We had the electronic speakers, and we were doing a live stream with OBS and the PTZ cameras where you can control them from like a console, and video projection, and electronic ensemble and instrumental ensemble. And in the trend, like the first two pieces went great. It's this, I think you saw this Ghost in the Sheets piece with the video, and then there's the ghost costumes, and they kind of like do some mild provocation to the audience, which for some people is already a huge provocation.
Yeah.
Then we had a small like Trond Reinholdsen homage. I gave out a composition prize to my colleague. I'm not speaking negatively, only positive about this man. Willy Polleiner. Willy, if you're watching this somewhere, thank you for submitting to the Agronimbus Kompositionspreis. You were the star. So we
Shout
made
out
it.
to Billy.
Billy, yeah, Billy Polacek. Yes. No, so it's a big event, and then in the switch, we brought the keyboard to another room, and we're getting ready. It's like intermission. It's okay. We're gonna set this up, plug it in, check if everything's working. No signal. It was like I custom programmed this MIDI keyboard in Super Collider to have all of these samples. Everything was like, certain MIDI controllers did certain things, filters and triggering all these samples, and playback speed did not work. Tried all kinds of things, different cables, different computers, different programs, none of it. The sound technic guy was like, yeah, like your keyboard, it's just not sending signal. And at this point, my heart is sinking.
Yeah.
I feel my heart rate speeding up. Like the ground beneath me starts to warp. I'm like, and the musicians are like, yeah, maybe we should just like, perform it in like a different context, maybe when we have everything working. And I'm like, and the thing was, at the beginning of the concert, I took people's money as part of the piece. Part of the concept was you can get in for free, but you don't get any chairs. And you're like in the corner of the room where you can't see very well. You're only watching a live stream. And there's like different packages you can pay for. If you want a good experience. So the highest package, it wasn't like a lot. It was like 35 franc or something. and then you get to like lay down. You get like a free snack or
I
drink.
mean, that sounds pretty Swiss, right? Offering a premium package.
Yes. It was part of my not so hidden social critique.
Yeah.
Of trying to reproduce social hierarchies, but not totally critique and say, it's so bad that we pay for things for nice things, but to make it a bit ambiguous where if you're in this privileged position, you get something, but you also maybe miss something because you're also being filmed. So they're a bit exposed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a whole different story. So anyway, I did this project and I had this moment where the keyboard broke and my heart was about to have a heart attack because I took people's money and, the director of the institute was there. The director of the New Music Institute was there.
Oh, no.
My composition professor, the other composition professors, some people from like the Swiss foundations were there. I think it's relatively well attended, these master concerts. I was like, but in the moment I said, okay, we're going to do it without the keyboard, whatever. And from that moment, I think my stress level, it can't get that high again. So like, I know like the worst is behind me for like the immediate future. From that moment, the keyboard breaking at my master recital in this like very, for me, quite high profile thing and taking people's money and everyone's like waiting outside. Everyone was waiting outside to come in. And we told them technical difficulties, please wait 20 minutes. I heard like, Dakota, people are leaving. I was like, so after that, okay. I think what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah, so that finished, and then I think things gradually kind of got a bit easier. I started a different program. It's a bit better work-life balance now, I would say.
Okay.
A bit more confidence, maybe.
And you don't need to arrange these huge projects for high-profile audiences.
At the moment, I don't have any big projects, but this is a different topic. It's like the role of the composer nowadays. How do you, if you have crazy, visions where you have like scenography, if you have all kinds of things that are not just like score and instrumentals playing it, how do you do it? Because a lot of concert halls don't support that.
True.
It's hard to arrange these things. So self-organizing is maybe necessary, I would say.
I think we'll get to this exact topic actually in a future question, but now you get to ask me a question.
Okay, great. Well, I think that relates to my first question, actually. For those of you who don't know, Guy and I studied together in Graz, at the Kunstuni Graz. What a lovely time. For me, I was discovering a lot of music and meeting all these people from all over the world. It was a really important time for me.
Yeah, exciting times, I would say.
Yeah. But now, since then, during the COVID years, you left Graz.
Yes.
And then you decided to actually start a career. You took you did a training and you took a job, and now you're still working on it in this internet security program.
Yeah, cloud security company.
Which, I really admire this. I think this is, first of all, super cool. Second of all, to work full time and still produce art is a challenge. So my first question to you is, I don't know, how is it balancing a career and artistic activities?
So I would say that it's easier than it might seem. We should put a caveat to that because I'm not in a relationship, right? And I don't have any big debts, right? I don't I don't have a mortgage, and I don't own a car. I live alone in Tel Aviv in a small apartment, so I don't have a lot of expenses. I do have a full-time job, but this job pays really well. And what I discovered personally for myself, that when I know that financially I'm set, I don't need to worry about financial things. I have a retirement plan, and I have and I earn way more than I spend monthly. So once I have this basically financial calm, that I know that I don't need to stress about my expenses, this frees a lot of storage room in my mind, and it gives me basically the time and the ease to actually think about ideas. For example, I'm writing a book now, which is a thing that I wanted to do for a long time. and I didn't have the mental capacity for that, even when I was doing like music full time, because it was so stressful. So I would say it is easy to do this balance if you're like in the right mindset. But again, I don't have kids. I'm not married. Like I don't pay mortgage. So under other circumstances, this might be like harder to balance.
Sure. But I mean, what you say is super relatable for me, at least. And I think it's super valid that like security is security. And okay, maybe, you know, the bohemian life is romanticized. Like, I'm poor and addicted to opium and living in Paris. Hector Berlioz. You know, this like archetype of the artist figure from the romantic time. It sounds super unsustainable. I don't know. How can people like create in this? I mean, okay, maybe they, you know, some people don't
and
have
these
a choice,
artists were suffering and they were trying to get out of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you read their diaries and like you hear stories from their friends. Like it's very clear that they, like, for example, Van Gogh, like everyone like romanticizes him like being crazy, and it's like, because he was so crazy, he created these insane artworks. And it's like, no, he tried to like medicate and like he tried to like actually save himself and he couldn't. And this was like a very tragic story, and we shouldn't romanticize that. We should try to like strive for like normal life along like being creative, because I think this will also help other people who are not in the directly in the creative arts see that you can be creative while having mundane life. And I think this is like one of the problems of like 21st century society. People believe that they can't be creative. Like creativity is for the artists, and I have like a normal like wage job and I don't need to be creative. Like other people think of creative things for me. And like, no, like the only way for society to move forward would be for more people to be creative and to understand that creativity is not like a gift from God. It's like, like everyone could be creative if they take enough time to actually think about things.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think it's also, I mean, just personally, it's important to be pragmatic, of course. You know, you have to sustain yourself to make things. But maybe it's kind of also important for people who are not so involved in creative arts to say, okay, there are these other people doing this creative stuff, but they're not like crazy hippies living in a dungeon, waking up at 4 p.m., taking a shot of heroin to the face and then doing their art. I can't relate to this, but say like, hey, these are normal people. Okay, they might have a bit of like a wonky lifestyle, but I should really take seriously this content and not keep it at a, you know, it's I feel like the difference in lifestyle can also almost be used as an excuse to keep it at a distance.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is kind of similar, like, okay, I can't create because like I have a job, you know, I got to like feed my family. I'm not like these crazy hippie types, artist types. No offense to the hippies. I think a very important cultural movement, but easy example. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like maybe also I would say the problem with society, one of the main challenges is this idea of like kind of the spheres that are so separated in society that they don't seem to communicate with each other even.
The classic example is like we share like around 90% of our DNA, right? Like our like biological material is like almost the same. So like to think we can't communicate with each other is like, it's insane to me. And like if you believe that you can't communicate with someone because of their like lifestyle or because of their political beliefs or whatever, like there's something wrong with you and not with them. My point of view.
Yeah, that's interesting. My opinion has always kind of been like the people who aren't willing to really like take a bit of an effort in, I don't know, communication process, in understanding, in looking at art. I think these things are very much tied together. I find it a bit disappointing. And I think it is a conscious effort that if you're confronted with something that's super different from your experience, be it an aesthetic object or someone who's leading a lifestyle or has cultural norms that are so different from you, I think you got to make that extra effort to like kind of see it from their perspective and try to reach them in the communication process.
Yeah.
And this is where I think mass media is very dangerous because it makes us so used to particular types of communication processes that it a bit you a bit forget that these are very much artificial ways of communicating.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it yesterday evening. Like, the reason I'm doing this podcast is because one of the reasons I'm doing this is because, like, we, the artists, we're so good with media, but we have so little power in media. And we should find ways to empower ourselves in media, because this is, like, the current situation is ridiculous. That, like, like these elites just control the media and they control the narrative, and people are buying into this narrative because there is no alternative, and we should give people this alternative.
Yeah, this very much reminds me of like the idea of free radio stations from the mid 20th century. I mean, I don't know so much about this topic, but I was reading a while back some Umberto Eco advice on how to write a thesis.
Cool.
And he's a great writer, of course. Yeah. But his example is like, say you're doing a research project on free radio stations in around Rome from the years 1967 to 1973. And of course, I mean, it's very like didactic and for this research purpose, but he actually does also a very good job of teaching you or telling you a lot about what these free radio stations are. There's examples, and I quite like this idea that it's not from the government, not for commercial purposes, but in that sense free, independent, and also with entertainment programming, but also with political messages or discourse and things. I think it's important. It's important.
Yep. Cool. So my second question to you, Wayne. This is actually like so I have some set questions that I'm asking all my guests, and I have at least one personal question.
Okay.
So this is like a question to you. So you have been here you're an American.
I am.
But you have been here in Europe for the past 7 years, more or less?
I moved to Graz in fall 2017. So it's almost 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 5.5-ish.
So my question would be, what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself?
Am I allowed to do product placements on this channel?
You're allowed to do anything you want.
Nike, just do it. I mean, in terms of what, I guess I would ask.
I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily you. Like, imagine a young artist just finished his bachelor's, out of college, fresh. He wants to like go into the world. That doesn't even mean he goes to Europe, right? Like, he can even stay in the US. But like, it's someone who wants to put his work out there and wants to make art and wants his art to matter, like I know you do. But has less experience that you have. So like, from your experience, what advice, or like, doesn't have to be one thing, like things I would guess you have learned throughout the years here that you wish you have known when you were younger?
I feel like that's for me a hard question, because I don't know if there was like things that I didn't know that would have like changed everything for me. Yeah, I think I would have said to myself, okay, maybe with like, I got to choose what version of myself, maybe with like 20 or something. I think I would have said something like, just like, whatever that boundary is that you're like afraid to jump through, just jump through it. Like, trust me, just do it. Nike, just do it.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a commercial for Nike, right? There's this Shia LaBeouf meme. You know this one?
Actual cannibal.
Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. No, there's a video he made like I think 10 years ago now. It's just a YouTube video where he just like looks at the camera and he just like yells, "Just do it! Do it!"
Yeah, I think same type of vibe, but maybe to clarify, because like when I was in my bachelor study, I how to go around this. I feel like as an American growing up in America in a very American setting, I just had like a veil around my perception. I didn't understand any other perspective of the world except the American's perspective.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the American perspective is a bit unique because, the Western hemisphere, like North America, South America, I feel like, okay, maybe there's, some colleagues from South America would have something to say, but at least growing up in North America, and I think Canadians might confirm this, is that there's not such it's kind of like a bubble that you live in, and there's not so much things that poke through. So many people go there, like to the States especially, but they all assimilate to American culture.
Yeah, I mean, there's an aura
culture
around the States, right? And but the aura is like from the outside, and when you're from the inside, you don't see it, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like it's a bit like The Truman Show, this movie, which I think is a really fantastic film.
Yeah.
I mean, but the film maybe is more about like the psychological perspective or media perspective. I think it also works on this like national pathos. Like Americans, they have this city on a hill mentality.
Yeah.
They're feel like they're the chosen people, or at least maybe until like the middle of the last decade where things really started to be obviously breaking apart.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe it's also like the culture I grew up in, which is like, white dominated culture, the kind of middle America, small town America, not so like culturally progressive, but I think it really felt like America for me when I was young as a kid. It felt like America was the center of the world, and you hear about all of the things happening. You think, oh, you're a place of culture. Like East Asia, place of culture. The Middle East, place of conflict. Africa. But you just don't understand like what the perspective is from these people, or actually what the geopolitical fallout of your country's actions. It's not really taught in school. So, okay, long story short, I think I was living in this cultural bubble, and that was also reflecting artistically. I mean, I was involved in the national tradition of music at that time. One of the national traditions of music, I should say, which is rock and roll music. And this for me was the creme de la creme, the end all be all. And I think it was the time I started in university studying composition, which of course, it's a European tradition, bippity boppity, but it's also an avant-garde tradition. And I was like, holy shit, my brain's a bit broken. And this started me on the downfall to where I am happily now. Yeah, but I think, okay, to answer the question, sorry, this is long. The things that were holding me back, I think, was nostalgia and fear, which came from being in this cultural bubble, and you just have no idea what's outside of it. I mean, I don't know, maybe I was somehow lucky because I had one professor in my bachelor's who was really, really pushing me to get outside it. I mean, she was Chinese American, grew up in Shanghai, and then moved to the States. It was when she was 18. Eventually, became very successful. But it was like, she's like, hey, I see that you were like a bit searching for something, or a bit like not 100% satisfied with the American styles, between neo-romanticism, minimalism, and kind of a very, very dusty high modernism.
Dusty high modernism.
Yeah, like they still think Xenakis is like the most advanced composer.
Which
I love Xenakis, but that was a long time ago. And she was like, hey, you should be more international in your mindset. And I had no idea what that meant. And she started to push me to look at schools in Europe. And that's when I started to look, and I had never looked before, and it never even occurred to me. One last anecdote was that when I did my audition there, my bachelor's study, I performed on an instrument, and then I showed some scores, and they're like, okay, cool. What contemporary music you're interested in? And I said, Steve Reich and Philip Glass. That's all I knew. That's all that was circulated. Even though I was, I think, an advanced music student for my age. I took music theory courses in high school. Did this AP exam, which are kind of like advanced courses for high school students, which are supposedly university level. And I did that in music theory and scored well, but I'd never only knew these composers who were living, and they asked me, I never forget this. They asked me, "Do you know any living European composers?" And it was like, I was like, "What? No one has ever asked me that before. European composers living?" I was like, wait a minute. no. And they're like, huh. Yes. And then now I'm living in Europe since 6 years almost, and I couldn't imagine going back. So long answer to a short question.
Cool. So I mean, it seems to me that the answer, like your suggestion to a younger version of yourself is actually get out of America, just to get a different perspective.
Yeah. In so many words, sure. I mean, me personally, I think looking back, I wasn't really happy there for so many reasons, and only coming to sunny Austria. So I'm so sorry. I love the Austrian German, beautiful accent. Sunny Austria, that I kind of experienced some different perspectives, and I feel like got out of this bubble.
Cool.
Okay. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. Okay. Okay, I'll ask my second question, which kind of bases off the first question.
Yeah.
So similarly, okay, you're now with this cloud security company. You're quite adept now in, I don't know the technical terms.
Like software development?
Yeah, software development. Yeah. You probably know more about P2P than I do, a lot more. But you're also still composing on the side.
Yeah.
On the side, not during your job working hours, but also composing and writing books and creating your multiverse, which will then be a generator of creative projects. And when you initially left Graz, I remember you said, okay, I want to go back to Israel, work a while, and then eventually come back to Europe. And you have this like special plan of like the Portugal pipeline of getting a visa for Portugal and then eventually living in Europe. So my question is, where do you see yourself in 10 years? So speculative or also maybe ideal?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think a year ago, it would be easier for me to answer this. But since World War III is like so clearly looming in the background, it's really hard for me to answer this because I have no idea if there will be an Israel or a European Union in 10 years from now. But assuming nothing changes, I'm currently actually working on two citizenships. Like I'm working both on like a Portuguese citizenship and a German citizenship.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
Portuguese from my father's side and German from my mother's side.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll get at least one of them. I mean, once I'll be a European citizen, the first thing I want to do in Europe is actually to buy land. Because one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest problem with Israel is that there's a company called Kakal, okay, and this company was actually created as part of like the colonialist Zionist project to like basically buy lands in Israel for the future Israeli Zionist state. And this was super successful, right? Because they bought so much land and they could establish a state, and this is great. And the problem is that they never dismantled Kakal. And in Israel, it's really hard to buy land, actually. And I believe that like one of the only things these days, like with this like global speculative economy, one of the only things that you could buy and actually has value over time is land. And since it's problematic to say the least to buy land in Israel, it would be nice to buy land in Europe. And I know there are so many all these government plans like that I have no idea if they'll exist 10 years from now for buying lands with reduced price if you're like building a farm on this land or something like that. So I mean, I have this fantasy of having this communal farm somewhere in Europe where people from all over the world can come and work in the farm and make art. And this farm is basically like a hub of art, but also of like a real community of people who grow their own food and share their ideas, and hopefully some of the good ideas of the group penetrate outwards to the greater society. So hopefully this is me 10 years from now, like managing like a communal farm
Wow.
somewhere in Europe. But on the other hand, like I see like the gradual death of Europe. Like the example I give all the time is that like Germany basically became like the puppet state of the United States. They severed their relationships with their greatest trading partner only because of like political reasons. So I do see a gradual decline of Europe over time, and I think World War III, which is very clearly coming now.
Oh my god.
I hope I'm wrong.
Oh my god.
But I'm usually not wrong about these things. So this will only accelerate the decline of Europe. So I have no idea. Like, I really have no idea. Like, I'm constantly researching the globe for countries I actually believe have a future. And actually, like, Israel, like, with everything that is happening now, I do believe there is a potential for a bright future. It depends on the people, not on the government. And currently the people are not waking up. But there is a potential for a bright future.
Okay. I mean, before we get too much into the geopolitics.
I don't know if we even have the time to get too much into that.
It's on my list.
Cool.
But I just wanted to say this reminds me of when you first came to Graz. Remember, you told me you were staying at some like farm in the countryside where the owners were like super nice and they loved having travelers, but you were also like creating some artistic things together.
Yeah.
Like you made like a board game together or something like this.
And I even wrote a composition for their children's album.
Ah, that's right. That's right. Okay. Where can we hear this, by the way?
I mean, I'm interested if it's still online. If it's not online, I'll just upload it and send it over.
Link in bio.
Yeah,
link in description.
Bio.
Okay. Cool. I mean, sounds great. It reminds me also of like artist residencies.
Yes.
I mean, maybe that's more like the careerist kind of career consumer version of this.
Yep.
But I think this is a nice plan if you can somehow manage to make it free, you know, not commercial, not
exactly, like
ideological, but for creative purposes, for promoting certain types of being together.
Yeah, like I think my main goal is spreading knowledge, spreading ideas, and like creating like actual open spaces for discourse. Like not non-censored places for discourse where you can also say like unpopular and uncomfortable things, right? Like, of course, for example, here, I also limit this, right? I say like, if there's something that is uncomfortable, like you can reject this question, but still, I do believe that like the more open we are, the more we have to gain out of this. Yeah.
I mean, just shortly to that point, I agree. I think that the media situation really makes it difficult to have public discourse without running into these absolute walls of being so careful or like being through the channels of communication or people being so ideologically charged through these channels of communication that it's so hard to like make meaningful discourse because people are immediately like, bam, like categorizing what you're saying or just unwilling to hear what you're saying. But anyway, more on that later. To go back to the second part. Okay, so 10 years, you know, maybe this farm community, artistic, creative idea, super cool. And then the geopolitics.
So is this a separate question or is this part of the same question?
I want to answer this, but I'm wondering if I should take a pause to drink this deliciously smoky whiskey in front of me.
You haven't taken a sip?
I have not taken a sip yet.
Okay, you should take more than one sip.
Okay.
This is a great whiskey. I think I'm already like halfway down this glass.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I thought we were going to do like, okay, first question on whiskey pause. We like clink and taste.
I mean,
talk about
maybe
the
this, since this is the pilot, maybe this should also be part of the format that we take a sip between questions.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so question over?
Yeah.
Let's take a
because
sip.
otherwise it would be a segue into the geopolitic topic.
Okay, and you have separate questions about geopolitics.
I have several
Great.
questions.
Okay, let's take a sip.
Okay. I have to take 2 sips, actually, because this is the second question. I didn't take my first sip.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Just like a deer hide that's been tanned in the sun for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Woo.
Our viewers can't, like... It doesn't go through the mediums we have here, but like this whiskey is smoky AF.
That is a smoky ass whiskey.
Yeah.
Someone in the comments is gonna be like, this guy's lightweight. Yo, you can't handle your whiskey, boy. Use a hammer.
Can't handle your Wisnik.
Your Wisnik. Okay,
second sip.
Take my second sip.
Okay, and I'll ask my third question.
Mm-hmm. Bring it on.
So, Dakota Wayne, tell us something we don't know about you.
I mean, the viewers probably don't know anything about me.
True.
Or should I tell the viewers something you don't know about me?
I mean, you can take it in any direction you'd like.
Okay, I gotta think about that.
Over another sip of Wisnik.
Damn it, I want to answer it, but like it's not so much as coming to my head. Like, should I tell like a silly anecdote of my teenage years where I did something really dumb and silly? Or like, should I bear a secret of my heart? But then I get anxious. I'm like, what are the secrets of my heart? If they're really a secret of my heart, why would I know them?
I mean, since we're getting into geopolitics later, maybe we should go with silly.
Okay. Silly. Something we don't know. Okay. The first answer that came into my head, I should trust my gut.
Yeah.
When I was, it's going to be such a teenage, like, wah, wah, wah moment. But it's actually... It's okay. It's 2 moments together.
Go ahead.
That I mean, right now I barely drink alcohol. I just I like it. I enjoy the taste. I've never had a problem with like drinking too much or too often. I don't think it's in my DNA to be an alcoholic. I just like being drunk is not like a sensation that I really crave. But when I was a teenager, of course, there were times where I took it too far. There are 2 moments where I got really, really drunk, and both had the same outcome. The first moment was I was 17, and I was going with my parents to visit some universities. This is what the Americans do. They say, okay, you're gonna apply to these universities. You should meet some students, maybe walk around the campus, get a feel for it, maybe meet a professor. And of course, sometimes you do interviews in person there. So I was going to visit New York University, which I thought was really cool when I was 17. I mean, it sounds like a cool university still. I didn't end up going for many reasons. But the night before, we stayed in New Jersey with my cousin's family. They live in, I think, oh my God, I might get some family flack for this, but I think West Orange. One of these.
West Orange?
West Orange.
Is there an East Orange?
I would have to look on a map. My New Jersey knowledge is thankfully fading into the distance. Sorry, any viewers from New Jersey, but as a New Yorker, I have to shit on New Jersey. And it's like, a kind of suburban community not too far from the city. In the morning, you take the train into the city. It's quite easy, quite comfortable. You don't have to drive in the city. And my cousin, who's about my age, was like, yo, do you like to drink and party? Me with 17 was like, heck yes, I do. And she took me to a party of her friends.
Okay.
I mean, I think she was a year or 2 older. So she took me to a house party that her friends were having in New Jersey.
And they were already students?
Yeah, we were all still in high school. So they were maybe a year older than me. At the last year of high school, I was my 3rd year in high school.
Okay.
So it was all kosher. Well, I mean, underage drinking in the States is never good. But of course, come on, I don't have to say anything to that. And of course, our parents were like, all right, like, we're like not the strict family. Just don't, hurt yourself, whatever. So we went to the party, and I was super socially awkward back then. You know, I was sitting there like sipping my drink. It's absolutely out of a film, you know, beer pong. People are like, oh, you know. This is what American teenagers sound like when they party.
Your imitation sounds like this guy from Star Wars Episode 1. The flying creature.
Annie! Watto, I think his name is.
Watto, yeah. So a bunch of Wattos around the beer pong table.
More or less Wattos around the beer pong. I mean,
Okay.
there's some cool people. I had some conversations, but I was awkward and I didn't really know what to do. And every 5 seconds you take a sip. I might have ingested some other herbs that also were altering my consciousness.
Yep.
And I found myself very, very, very drunk and a bit spinning around at the end of the night. And I was like, to my cousin, I was like, hey, I gotta go home. I'm tired. She's like, okay, I can take you home. I'm still going to hang here, but my boyfriend can drive you home. He's not been drinking. We were relatively responsible. When he's not been drinking, so he'll drive you home. It's a 5-minute drive. He'll come back. I was like, okay, thanks. And, you know, I stand up and then I'm like, whoa. And what I do is I'm like, okay, either I'm going to vomit or I'm going to shit my pants. I don't know which. My mind is not functioning correctly.
It has to come out from either direction.
Something is coming.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the moment where which one of it? Is it Merry or Pippin who knocks the skull down in the mines of Moria? And you hear the drums from the deep and you're like, something's coming.
Yeah.
So I drunkenly stumble into the living room. But for some reason, I paused and looked at what they were doing. They were playing Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64. My generation of video games. So I'm like, dude, let me get in on this. Sit down. We play Rainbow Road.
Ooh.
For anyone who knows Mario Kart, this is the most difficult level.
Yep.
The road is a rainbow that stretches and winds through space, but there's no railing. So if you fall off, you go into space. I aced it. I have never driven the Rainbow
While being
Road.
drunk.
Yes, it was. We did split screen 4-player. I did not fall off once, and I won.
That's impressive.
I know. Immediately stand up, go outside, and I'm like, okay, which one's gonna happen? My body sends me the signal, and I made a split-second decision. So I walk to the side of the house in the shadows, still on their front lawn, but kind of like in the sides.
Yeah.
Like if you drove by, you wouldn't immediately see me. Pull down my pants, and I pooped on their front lawn.
Nice.
Did not tell anyone. Got the ride home. I don't know if my cousin ever knew. I don't know if anyone at the party ever connected me to the incident, but I never heard anything about it again.
Cool. I mean, and now it's for everyone to see on the internet.
I did some silly things when I was a teenager.
So the second incident was the same thing, basically?
I don't want to tell a super long story again.
Yeah.
The second incident was a bit similar,
Okay.
involving a Mexican wedding. That's all I will say.
Okay.
I was 19
Let's leave
at
it
the
to
time.
to the imagination.
Since
yeah.
then, I've really curbed I've been able to control myself and not get so drunk when I drink, and to the point where I cannot control my bowels.
Cool.
I'm responsible now. Hi, Mom and Dad. Okay.
That being said,
A sip
between questions.
to pooping on someone's lawn.
Indeed.
Yes. Great. Okay. I mean, you asked me kind of like an interlude question. So maybe I will ask you an interlude question before we maybe get into the geopolitics, which something is coming.
Something's coming.
I'll give you a choice. Would you like a culinary question or a more absurd question?
Ooh, it's hard to decide. Why do I have to decide?
Okay. Describe the benefits of lab-grown humans. Like, you know how there's lab-grown meat? Like,
Okay.
I can imagine in like some sort of dystopian future where they're just growing whole humans in the lab.
I mean, I would assume that if you have the technology to grow an entire human in the lab, you could also like prevent some like diseases that that are already existing at birth. so like you can grow like non-autistic kids.
Sure, like any birth defect could be scientifically corrected.
Exactly,
See in
no
the gestation
diabetes,
process.
no, yeah. So that's one benefit. Like
Right.
another benefit is just like cheap labor, right? I mean, if you can grow like an entire human being and you have the technology also to like set some like knowledge into this human being, you can like grow a human being that like has a specific knowledge of doing like a specific task.
But what you say is not so far off, because like if like instincts are embedded in DNA, like,
Yeah, exactly.
the baby turtle knows to swim into the ocean. What you say could be possible.
But like, I mean, of course, like this is the question, like, should I bring any ethics into this discussion? Because like, of course, like ethically, like, I don't think I need to explain the problems of what I just described, right?
Well, the question, if we're being strict, the question is describe the benefits. So it's really a loaded question.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think the benefits are clear. Like, of course, like cheap labor, no
labor.
birth defects,
Birth defects.
and also like there is a current problem in the West, right? Of like the birth rate is
Slowing birth rates. Yeah.
it's not only slow, it's negative.
Negative. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a negative birth rate. So of course, like another benefit is like people don't have to have sex anymore. Like you don't want to have sex, fine. Don't have sex, don't have children. We'll make our own artificial children. Like the government can just make as many children they want, like to get the economy going, right?
Government produced children.
Yeah. So
Sure.
I think these are the benefits. But like, of course, again, ethically, like I'm not a big fan of like,
it's like
lab-grown humans.
It's like what Obama said in around like 2013 or 14. He said, hey, he gave it a State of the Union address, and he said, we need America's youth. We need more engineers. We need more STEM, like science, technology, engineering, mathematics. America should grow in these technological fields. Like you can write poetry on the side. I'm not kidding. Obama really said this in his State of the Union
What
address.
did you say exactly?
This was around 2013. Obama gave a State
So
of the
it's
Union
after
address.
his re-election.
Yeah.
So he could say whatever he
The
wants.
late
Yeah.
second term, he gave a State of the Union, and in it he encouraged young people, my generation basically, I was around 21 at the time, to pursue STEM fields. STEM, I think it's an American term for science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Okay.
And he said something like, we need this, to help our country, blah, blah, blah. But, you can write poetry in your free time. This was his logic. So instead of waiting for people to pursue those fields, you could simply just flip some switches in the lab,
Yeah,
grow a generation of STEM field
Generate
researchers.
some engineers.
Generate the engineers. I don't say this is good or bad, but Obama could have done it.
Obama.
Had he had the technology.
Had
the technology was there.
Well, I don't know what to say.
Okay, maybe it's a bit of a too absurd question.
No, I mean, I think we're not far. We're not far from the like cloning technology already exists.
CRISPR.
What is CRISPR?
Oh man, I don't know so much, but I had a friend who was talking about a biology pharmaceutical industry friend who was talking about this CRISPR technology, and this is like gene modification technology, from what I understand.
Okay.
And they can already do some like gene modification in simple organisms.
This is insane.
It's called CRISPR.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not so knowledgeable in this to bring it up in the podcast, but yeah, it's not so absurd, not so off the radar.
Yeah. I mean the to get maybe to like the negative birth rate thing.
Yeah.
Just because we brought it up, it just like reminded me, and because you said we're going to discuss some geopolitics, it reminded me of Yasser Arafat's saying that he said that like the greatest weapon of Palestine is the Palestinian women's womb.
Ooh, okay.
So he said he will win by the numbers.
I mean, I respect this kind of reasoning.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm definitely on the pacifist side of things, but it's like, okay, if you are a people who are being oppressed, for lack of a more nuanced term, then how can you fight? How can you really like, yeah, try to like have a life for your people and populating.
Yeah.
It sounds so basic, but
Exactly.
populate.
Yeah. I
sure.
mean, just to be clear, Yasser Arafat was not a pacifist.
No,
but
of course, I know the history.
history.
But in this point, I respect this as like, okay, it's kind of ingenious in a way. It's like you can't really fight that.
Yeah.
Although you can.
You can. You can.
Oh, okay, maybe we should dive into the geopolitics.
Yeah, we should move on.
Move it on.
Well, another sip.
Another sip.
To
Actually, I
the
don't know
Palestinian women's womb.
Yes, I can cheer to that.
Yeah.
Oh my god! I recently watched a documentary on Edward Said. It was very nice.
Obama's spiritual teacher, basically.
Really? Okay, I didn't know there was an Obama connection.
Yeah, he studied with Edward Said and he like adored him. Yeah.
Wait, that's insane.
Yeah.
But Obama drone strikes.
I mean, he doesn't have to be like, he doesn't have to have to love Arabs.
This reminds me of another anecdote I heard. It's very interesting. I feel like there's like a trend of like respected intellectuals and philosophers giving advice to politicians who actually are totally different.
Yeah.
Or like even opposite maybe.
Yeah.
But someone told me recently, there's this Italian philosopher, Massimo Cacciari, I think his name is. He worked a lot with Luigi Nono, the Italian composer.
Oh, okay.
And they produced some texts together. He also kind of was like also a spiritual guide or intellectual guide for Nono in some aspects. He was also a politician. He was the mayor of Venice in the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
Also a dedicated leftist.
Okay.
In like the end of the 19th, 20th century. But in the 90s, and so someone told me this, I haven't checked it, but in the 90s, apparently he was the philosophy teacher of Berlusconi's wife.
Berlusconi?
Yes. Yes. And I'm like, what? But how does this make sense?
I mean, it's his wife. It's not him.
It's not his wife. I mean, it's not him. It's his wife.
Yeah.
But still, like this connection, like, okay, really dedicated leftist philosopher.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but maybe he thought he was, or maybe he was doing something by implanting some utopic ideas, leftist ideas in the wife of Berlusconi.
Yeah, I mean, also there are all these like political strategists. Like I know it's not the same thing, right? But there are like these political strategists, for example. It's just their career, and you can see that like in one like election they'll advise someone from the right, and then like they'll advise someone from the far left in the next election. It's just like whoever pays more, they'll work for him. So like, I don't know, it's a job like any other job, I guess.
It's a job. Philosophers also need jobs.
Exactly.
God bless up
and
philosophers.
The Berlusconis, they have a lot of money.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
Yeah. Okay, so my fourth question.
Ooh.
So, assuming you have no limitations, right?
Okay.
No geographical limitations, no financial limitations, no like censorship related limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Describe us your fantasy project.
Ooh, good question. I thought this was geopolitics. Well, maybe it will be. So no geographical limitations, no financial
limitations at all. Any limitations that you can think of, you don't have these limitations.
Oh man, I haven't really thought of this in a while because I've been in the past 2 years really trying to be a bit pragmatic.
Yeah.
Because I have to be in Switzerland. I mean, really quite good situation in many ways, but also you have to be very, very pragmatic and
of course, but we're artists. We have to fantasize. Okay.
Ideal project. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing like crazily like out of the scale of your imagination, but the format that I can imagine doing had I very little limitations would be something like audience immersive in like a really big space, off space with good floors. That's very important.
Good floors.
Good floors.
Okay.
Where you can do things like use food, get really messy, get super close to people, a bit provoke people. Yeah, and of course, have technical resources, video projection, and instrument production. I mean, it's kind of like my overarching artistic project is to how to unify this a bit and make it doable on the small scale. For the people who have no idea, I had been very interested in using food in pieces for a while. I did a meat piece.
Yeah.
And other smaller things, throwing spinach around in the audience or squirting people with some mist from a squirt bottle, not directly in the face, but a bit from close. And I'm very interested in this idea of proximity. I guess you could say in a way to work against any sense of social alienation that people may feel or that may be present. Yeah, I would just simply do this on a large scale and really like a whole long, large form, like a whole evening where different rooms, different interactive situations. Yeah, throw some spaghetti at some people, see what happens. I mean, it sounds so dumb to say, but for me, this, like, the materiality of food is so, like, it's like squishy and you smell it and you feel it.
I mean, we have opened a restaurant together.
We did in 2018.
Yeah.
We did as part of an exhibition, we opened a restaurant in a gallery, which we will not name by name, as a performance installation. And I think we were onto something a bit ahead of its time within the new music world.
For sure.
Of course, in the 60s, this thing was done a lot in New York.
Yeah.
In the kind of Fluxus affiliated school. But in new music, I think hasn't really caught on. So I think we had something quite memorable. But yeah, I like, these kind of, if I may use this term, auratic, related to this idea of the aura, that there's like so much sensory information that it becomes quite powerful, quite affective.
Yeah. And also, in a way, it forces the audience to interact with your art. Yeah.
I mean, here I have a caveat because I think in theater, interaction has become a buzzword.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't, it shouldn't be like the audience is forced to interact, that like you have to be active or else you're passive and that's bad. I think it's also very, very okay to be like a bit passive and things. But to create these situations where people have to make choices, do I interact and what do I gain and what do I lose? And if I don't interact, then what position do I take? And to make them very aware of these positions, actually. Which is related to the media situation of society. Okay. Ideal project would be just a very large scale version of this, which is in the genre of performance or music theater, music performance, music theater. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've succeeded in creating a mindset where I'm living project to project and not trying to think about the future, because I don't think it's so productive for me at the moment. But I think this would be my answer.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's link to social de-alienation.
Social de-alienation. Cheers. Yeah, I mean, if I may go on a bit on a tangent here, that I did a bit of research about this when I was writing my master thesis, and I got really interested in the relational aesthetic, what I was talking about from Nicolas Bourriot, which is this French theory from the field of visual arts, where he was trying to describe a lot of these kind of performative, installative, socially focused artworks. And I think there's some quite good theories that talks about exactly this. He mentions, for example, the information superhighways, of a bit of like this idea of reified communication, or like so standardized or so hardened that it becomes like unquestioned. Like, that the artwork that the art gallery has to have a gala for the donors, for example. It's like so unquestioned in some parts of the art world, or that the concert has to have like a buffet afterwards. And apéro in Switzerland. This is the Swiss mindset that after the concert, you have an apéro, some snacks and drinks where everyone can socialize.
Yeah.
And that these social zones of interactions are already super hardened and preformed by for example, the flow of capital behind the artistic creation, or the kind of the need to be a career artist, things like this that he talks about,
which is insane when you think about it, because like it puts them in like the superposition of being like natural, like of course using brackets, and unnatural at the same time, because they're manufactured by the social situation, but at the same time, like people are so used to this that it becomes like a second nature for concert goers.
Yeah, this became very interesting to me in the past few years, and we recently had a conference on the situationists, where we read again Guy Debord and like kind of reevaluated his theories. Very, very nice, very nice.
Cool.
But of course, it's so utopic that you can't really imagine what a situationist art would look like today.
Yeah.
Because it's almost silly to say like, we can, through focusing on situation, we can depose the bourgeoisie mindset in art. It's like, okay, like this was what they were saying in 1969, and look where we are today. Like, okay, it had some resonance, but did it totally throw the situation off and create this proletarian utopia? No.
Yeah, I mean, today it sounds kind of cringe, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit naive sounding.
Yeah.
Maybe. But my interpretation, for example, reading some of these situationist texts, because he talks about like the unity of like place, time, and affect, which sounds actually quite classical if you think of like Aristotle theories of aesthetics, like theater theory, where there's a unity of place, time, and action. Guy Debord echoes some of these things in his concept of like, okay, we had to create a space situation where we're walking around, but it's like effectual rooms and the architecture is connected. I raised my hand in this convention. I was like, isn't that just a shopping mall?
Amazing.
It's still very interesting to look at this lens, but like you can't really like I can't really buy into this like social revolution idea, because this exact idea has been carried out, but for the most capitalistic tendencies and purposes.
I mean, it's hard these days to not be cynical, I feel.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Okay, so
I drink to that.
I'll drink to that. Fourth question, Dekota.
Fourth question.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it towards the geopolitics.
Yep.
Okay. It's maybe an on the nose question, but it's one I've been wanting to ask you personally in our friendship.
Okay.
But it's also very, very, very timely because of some events that have happened on October 7th, 2023.
Yeah.
I've been following the news a lot, and boy, I mean, this is the conflict that makes me feel like I want to be cynical about this, but I know I should fight it because I don't want to be so cynical. But like, man, that's fucked up. As an Israeli, I will ask you, how do you think that this conflict between Israelis and Palestinians could possibly come to a peaceful solution?
So this is, of course, a difficult question,
sure.
Naturally. I mean, I think the main problem is that most people don't know how to categorize this conflict. Okay?
Okay.
Some people call it a religious conflict. Mm-hmm. Some people call it a national conflict. I reject both theses.
Okay.
I think it's a conflict for resources.
Mm-hmm.
In the land of Israel / Palestine / whatever, you can call it however you want. You can call this like piece of land. Yeah. But in this piece of land, there's more or less, right? Like a 50-50 divide between Jewish people and Palestinian people. You have like around these today, as of this recording, like 7.5 million Jews and 7.5 million Palestinians. Of course, you have other groups that have other identifications, and not all Jews see themselves as Israelis or as Zionists, and not all Arabs see themselves as Palestinians, and not all Arabs are Muslim. But generally speaking, this is more or less 50-50 division. But the way resources are divided in this land is not equal between Jews and Palestinians. And I think once this will become like the main point of the discourse of like thinking, how can we share these resources, not even equally, like in a fair way. It doesn't have to be equal. It has to be fair. Because, for example, in the West Bank, you basically like, and this is not only my personal opinion, right? Amnesty International, like already a year ago, they defined the situation in the West Bank as pure apartheid, right? Because you have around between 2.5 and 3 million Palestinians living with no civilian rights, while you have like 500,000 settlers living with full civilian rights from the state of Israel, right? They can vote in the election, they get the infrastructure, they get electricity, they get everything they need. So, and there are like these separate law systems, right? If like a Palestinian in the West Bank breaks the law, they need to stand trial like in a military court, Israeli military court, and not an actual court with like legal representation and everything. So I think once the discourse becomes like, how do we make the resources we have in this land, if we think of how to divide them fairly between the groups of people, they don't have to live in peace even. It's just about like dividing these resources in a fair way. Once this will be the main goal of both leaderships, both the Palestinian leadership and the Israeli leadership, I think we might have a way to like actually establishing something resembling peace in this region. Okay. Up until then, like this will be constant war, because people are just like miscategorizing this entire conflict, in my point of view.
I mean, is it like the point that like, if the Palestinian people in Gaza, West Bank, have resources for themselves, then they can then form a solid foundation for a state, which can then can force its own independence or fight a bit in a meaningful political way for rights.
I mean, not necessarily. This is exactly the problem, right? Because the first two intifadas, and the third intifada probably coming this year. At least the first two intifadas, they came actually in a time of like prosperity for the Palestinian people. Okay. They actually had time to think about like their political ambitions and their national ambitions. And this is what brought on the intifadas. So I'm not sure that financial prosperity definitely leads to peace. Because, and that's what I'm saying, it's not really about the financial prosperity. It's about like the division of resources. Because if the Palestinians feel that they have enough resources to develop what they envision as a state, and I'm not a Palestinian, I don't speak Arabic good enough to actually say what the Palestinians, to speak on behalf of the Palestinians and what they envision as a state. But I do believe that once you have the resources to actually develop something, then we can have like a fair discourse between the two groups. Up until then, like this is not balanced in any way. Like you can say, like, of course, like historical reasons, like also like Russia and the United States are not balanced. Like, should we balance Russia and the United States? And I would say no, but like this is a different situation because you have two groups that are not going anywhere. right? Like they're now like right wing, like extreme right wing. Not even the extreme right, even the Israeli center. They're proposing like deportation of Palestinians from Gaza, and like Palestinians don't want to go away from Palestine. They actually want to live there.
Understandably so.
Yeah, like of course not all of them. Like not all of the Jews want to live in Israel. Actually, most of the Jews don't live in Israel. But like the Palestinians that do live in Palestine, most of them actually want to stay there. And like thinking like of like deporting them and like not allowing them to live in their state, this would only cause more violence and more animosity. So I would say like the state of mind should be, okay, we're both here. No one's going anywhere. Let's think of how we can divide these resources in a way that we can live side by side. Maybe sometimes there'll be violence, but like at least we'll have like some kind of like an equal footing of like of a basis that we can like base our societies on and strive for some kind of like a future. Because currently both leaderships, they don't propose any vision for the future. All they propose is more war, more violence, and if that's the only thing you propose and that's the only thing you promise, that's what will happen. Like no one in Israel has a vision for peace, and no one in Palestine has a true vision for peace. So I think this vision could stem from like a fair distribution of resources.
Like, for example, if I was reading a bit recently about the oil mining or oil collection off the coast of Gaza.
Yes.
Like, for example, if this was firmly under the control of some governmental organization, some civic organization of the Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we both don't trust the state, right? Palestinians don't trust the Palestinian Authority, and most Israelis don't trust the Israeli state and government. This is what makes the situation so complex. Like, if there will be an option to actually set like actual institutions that are not governmental but also don't cause chaos, this would be amazing. But I'm not sure if it's like, I'm not sure if we're there yet.
But like the logic is that like if the Palestinian people collectively had some resource, not just money, not prosperity necessarily, but natural resource, then like the Israelis or the government would be more inclined to, like they would have something that is like a bargaining chip on the table.
And also on the other hand, think about it, like they'll have something to lose.
Okay.
Like an attack like the October 7th attack would never happen if the Palestinians would have something to lose.
Right.
Like the only reason they this brutal attack happened is because they really had nothing to lose anymore. Like Israel has been choking them for like the past 15 years. So like at this point, like what else could have they done? Like I don't justify any of the actions like done by the terrorists of the October 7th attack, but like thinking of that from their point of view, like what else could they have done? Like they don't have anything to lose anymore.
That is a dangerous situation, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you so often hear this example in English, like an animal cornered will become desperate.
Yeah.
Okay, it's so uncool to say animal in this context, but in a way that when a group of people become cornered, when they have no other options, then desperation. Yeah,
of course, they like default to like pure instinct.
I remember seeing on the news some interview with some young guy in Gaza during some protests, one of many, and he said something like very simply, okay, he doesn't support Hamas, but like at least they're doing something. In his eyes, at least they were taking an action. And maybe for some people that's
but that's the problem.
Enough.
But that's the problem. This is like the exact political situation in Israel, right? Because like they're like a lot of people don't like the current government, but they're like that's the best we have. Like people don't like most people in Israel. They don't want to hear about like a new election or like changing the government right now. Even though this, in my opinion, this would be the best thing Israel could do, like replace this terrible government. But people are so like, this goes back to what we talked about before. People are so uncreative these days. They're thinking so much in like schemas and like boxes and like maybe also the current technological situation is contributing to this, right? But like people are being so uncreative these days. They can't think outside of their own realities, and this is a dangerous situation because this keeps us in this like perpetual war in the Middle East or like also in other places, right? Like
Ukraine.
Africa, like like people, they don't think of like creative solutions, and the result is just like perpetual suffering.
Yeah, I mean the mention of the media situation always gets me going.
Yeah,
I mean it's hard, of course, to say okay, it's because of this one thing.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I don't know. I think of this idea of bubbles that, for example, the United States is a cultural bubble. An apartheid state creates also bubbles where, the other side is across a wall or a fence. It's separated. And when you are then mainly interacting through the world through social media or through screens and pictures, then I don't know, more and more I have the feeling that like we live in an increasingly bubbled world.
Yeah.
And, the bubbles may be windows onto this virtual utopia, but it's also a prison that, it's hard to get out of, or it forces us into these thought patterns that we don't realize.
Yeah. I mean, I'm adopting the Steve Bannon approach. That
The Steve Bannon approach.
Yeah, basically we have some elites. Like you can define the elites however you'd like, right? Like, but like when I say elites, you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
You have some elites that are controlling all the resources. This is again like a resource question, right? Like we have some elites that are controlling most of the resources, and what we should do is basically like not allow these elites to control so many resources anymore. Once we do that, like, I don't think that like everything will get better, but like we'll have a better chance of things getting better moving forward.
I always, when people say things like this, I think of the game of life. You know, this like algorithm thing where like the individual square can like destroy a square next to it or something like this. But I remember watching it in some courses, the Kug, that in our electronic music courses, where you see like actually structures emerge and they kind of like suck up all of like the other neighboring squares. I feel like that's just what happens now in society. That there are these groups that are sucking up all of these resources, and it's creating this imbalance.
But it's our choice, right? It's like your choice to go into Facebook. It's your choice to buy stuff out of Amazon. It's your choice to search things on the internet through Google. There are so many other search engines these days. Like, it's our choice, and we can make better choices. So, Mr. Wayne.
Yes.
My final question to you. Tell us about something cool you're currently working on.
This is the final question. I thought it was like, tell us your opinion. That's an American. How is your country responsible?
No, this is your time for pure, unindulgent self-promotion.
There are 3 things I'm currently working on.
Okay, tell us about
different levels of importance and public spotlight, may we say.
Okay, tell us about them.
I'll start from the lowest to the highest. The lowest is just a small ensemble piece for 6 musicians where I decided I'm going to generate all the pitches algorithmically. And it's only 16th notes at tempo 140. And it's only ascending or descending lines, or a bit of a combination of the two. So a very small exercise. And the musicians are very... they're not overjoyed to receive so many notes, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I'm interested in kind of algorithmic generation as well. I've been working in Super Collider, this C++ code-based programming environment. Eventually, I want to improve my skills so I can really take control of the XML format, music XML. There is some support for this in Super Collider, but it's very basic, and I have to go into the source code a bit to.
So you're generating the code through Super Collider?
In Super Collider, there is a music XML object, which allows you to create a music XML file and populate that file with pitches, durations. This object doesn't have support for articulations, and the rest function is a bit broken.
Okay.
So I hope to be able to eventually improve upon that. But that's kind of like my small exercise in a more larger back burner project. Secondly, I'm working on kind of a more speculative project where I don't know when it's going to be performed, but I'm calling it a dream chamber.
Ooh.
And it has to do with some of the research I'm doing on nearness and proximity. So thinking about, okay, the artwork presents this imaginary world that we are kind of sucked into when we're totally absorbed in it.
Okay.
And this has some background in literary theory, in theater theory, also in game theory or virtual reality, that describe that the way the artwork functions as absorbing you into it, or you becoming absorbed or immersed in it.
Mm.
And then the opposite of that, which for me, which is kind of like breaking the fourth wall, or kind of what is often translated from the work of Bertolt Brecht as the alienation effect, or the Verfremdungseffekt, which creates this kind of distance where, the characters become super self-aware that they're characters in a play. They speak directly to the audience. The narrative becomes broken, or you're suddenly super aware of the situation you're in. So I wanted to kind of deal with going between these layers. So I'm creating this dream chamber, which on the one hand is kind of a mixed electronic instrumental piece. It's very immersive, using field recordings, and kind of thinking of the music as very like scenographic. Like I want to create like a beach scene, but then like, some weird shit happens and there's an explosion, and then you have like this tinnitus in your ear, the ringing in your ear, and then it comes like this like underwater recording, and then kind of thinking of very like pictorial scenes, but to create this kind of immersive effect that's a living dynamic world that you're listening to. But at the same time, then choreograph some actions onto the audience member that will then pull them out of it. Like, I imagine they're laying down on kind of like a yoga mat or something, or like a mattress, and it's dark and the big speakers. There will be musicians playing live also, but very much blended with the electronics. So it's not so much about their live performance, but about the world they're creating. And then, a performer comes and like pulls you a bit, like 1 inch to the right or something.
Ooh.
So it's like not really super provocative, but a bit like jerking you in one side where you can't help but be distracted.
Yeah, like reminding you that there's a world outside of the actual performance that you're experiencing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this layer of like breaking the fourth wall, which has to do with interaction, the situation surrounding you, versus this kind of artistic inside the medium of sound, this world that's created.
Yeah.
So this has become very interesting to me, that like you can kind of jump in between these layers. Speculative piece.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of working on it when I have time and developing it. And then third is I have a piece with Ensemble Recherche. I'm very lucky and thankful to have a part of their kind of like students do this thing project, where a couple of students from Basel, a couple of students from Freiburg create pieces on the theme of the archive. Okay. Yeah, the idea is, they want to re-perform the archive, so taking pieces from the Ensemble Recherche archive, or the experimental studio of the SWR, the Southwest German radio station. So taking also from the archive of the SWR, Southwest German Radio. So famous pieces that they've worked on in the past. And the list is quite big. It's like Brian Ferneyhough, Time and Motion Study number 2, or Griset, Vortex Temporum, or Stockhausen Mantra. It's like very, very famous pieces for the new music world. Yeah. And they want students to then reinterpret them for today. There's a bit of like a hidden agenda that they want to like look at it a bit in the legacy of like post-colonialism. How are these institutions different now that we have this kind of attitude of like the West is no longer the center of the world for Europeans. It's a bit silly, but it's also okay. It's a good challenge, and it's also an important question. How can we really deal with this legacy of colonialism while being new music composers? Yeah, and a bit like in some indirect way, or maybe not so indirect way. The most abstract music of that time was profiting from the the wealth of nations that came from colonialism. Okay, it's connected somehow. So I'm working with a Luigi Nono piece,
Ooh.
Das atmende Klarsein,
Okay.
which in English translates to the breathing clarity, which he wrote with this Italian philosopher, Massimo Cacciari, who wrote the text. But the piece is a very interesting spatial concept that it's choir and bass flute, and there's microphones, and it's projected all around the hall, like 6-channel projection. And it has some very utopic idea of like wandering and searching for this utopic space, that after the storm, there's this clarity where you can kind of remember things. And it has like texts from ancient Greek tombstone inscriptions. It's a bit mystical, but it has this kind of like utopic idea, which I connect with Nono's personal political goals. You know, he's a very, very staunch communist leftist in the 60s with this piece, for example, Intoleranza 1960, which is, it's literally like communist revolution now. Orchestra plays like super atonal music. So I chose that because of the spatial concept.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the social spaces of the concert hall. But my twist is I'm going to build a 3D world in Unity, this game engine.
Cool.
And try to create some of the images from the poem of the piece inside Unity, and then have a live stream camera on the musicians and on some interactive things and stream it into the game world.
Ah, wow.
So it's this idea of interaction where the audience is a bit provoked to do something, which is this kind of idea of passivity versus activity in social situations. But it's all viewed through this utopic your virtual world. So I'm still quite early in the process, but I love designing a world in Unity.
Yeah.
I spent many hours last week designing weather effects.
Ooh.
The opening line of the poem and the first text that's sung in the piece is Nach spätem Gewitter, which is after thunder at night, or after thunder late in the day or something. So I decided, okay, I'm going to interpret this very literally. I'm going to create some thunder weather effects in the game engine.
Cool.
And then synchronize that with some instrumental sounds. Yes. So that is what I'm currently working on artistically. I mean, for me, it's very important that my artistic work reflects my ideas about the world. And I think we have a lot of agreement points on our geopolitical analysis. I mean, maybe you're a bit better informed with some things, and you're a bit harsher towards the West than I tend to be, or I say. But I think for me, this idea of passivity in the media situation is very important.
Yeah.
So that's why in the past years I've worked on pieces that, through simple interactions, indirectly or directly, provoke people to make a decision.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool. A lot of exciting projects. I think in the link we'll put the most up-to-date place where you actually post these, like either your website or your Instagram profile, whatever.
Yes, I do have a website that I designed, so we can post that in the link.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So these were my questions. Now you get to ask me the last question.
The final question. It's the final question. All right, let me look back at my list. How do you think that I think we were together in saying, okay, the left has become a bit confused maybe, or not so effective recently in comparison to what a leftist position might have been in the early 20th century, the mid 20th century, of like hardcore, like communist revolution, socialist revolution, fight against the capitalist pigs.
Yeah.
Bippity boppity. How do you think the left can become relevant again for today, or how can it make a comeback to make it really this strong counter movement to the alt-right or capitalism, liberalism?
I think it's actually quite simple. They need to do two things that they're like terrified from doing.
Okay.
They need to reject liberalism, and they need to adopt populism.
Okay.
I think that's the only way. I think actually Bernie Sanders in the States was very close to getting there. Of course, he was completely stumped by the Democratic establishment twice in a row.
What a ridiculous thing.
Yeah. I think the same thing happened in France when you had, like, for example, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who was an actual contender for the position of presidency, but like the leftists preferred the liberal Macron, and we see the result. I think the left should understand that, okay, we're smaller now than we used to be, but it doesn't mean we have to make a political alliance with the liberals. And it doesn't mean, and like, we should represent the populists. We should represent the people. We should represent the working class. We shouldn't be afraid of being populist. We shouldn't be afraid of actually representing like normal people's day-to-day problems. Even if some of these people are racist, it doesn't mean, like racist or whatever, or like some things that the left doesn't like. It doesn't mean we can't work together for some shared goals, for the better good of people. Like, yeah, this is what I think the left should do, basically.
So it's more, you think it's like they could make a return to solidarity politics?
Yeah.
In this very, very general sense, like try to build a very strong popular coalition that's politically viable.
Yeah.
That really can elect representatives to the government.
Yeah. I mean, they don't even have to be in the government. Like, they can also be an effective opposition. But in order to be an effective opposition, you need to raise some popular issues. Not only, I mean, I'm sorry, like, I have no issue with like LGBT people. Like, of course, they deserve rights and everything, but like, these are minor issues. Like, I'm sorry, like, there are much grander issues that are related to like asset distribution and class and technology and social issues that are much more important than the rights of like some minor groups in society. And I think like some of these issues of like minor groups in society, some of them, not all of them, but like some of them will be resolved once we resolve these grander issues of like resource inequality. Like, I mean, we talked about like Georgism, for example, right?
Georgism.
Like Henry George in the United States, like I think he was from the like, I'm not even sure about the timeline. I think he's from the 19th century. But he basically advocated of like abolishing all taxes, except for like land value tax, like only taxing the land, which means that like, and it doesn't matter, like you're taxed for the land itself, right? Not for the like the added value you have for that tax. So if you have like a 1 acre of land and it has nothing on it, but or if you have a 1 acre of land and you have a mall on it, like you will be taxed the same. But this gives people who own land incentive to actually develop these lands, and on the other hand, people who have too much land to maybe sell some of it. And I think, for example, this would be like very popular if the left would start like proposing it as a serious policy that they would like to implement. So I think, yeah, like thinking of like how to bring up policies that would still be leftist in concept, right? But that will serve as many people as possible.
Yeah, if I can paraphrase, maybe we should say for the viewers out there, the racism obviously very, very bad, and the rights of minorities and the protection of minority groups should be worked for. Yeah, but perhaps there's a way to accomplish these goals and at the same time create a greater coalition that's not only focusing on minority issues, but to try to put it under the umbrella of class issues.
Yeah, and also I think that like neoliberal identity politics doesn't help. It only creates more hate. It doesn't solve these social issues. I think it's generated more racism than actually solved racism. So, like, I think, yeah, like you have like a revival of the Ku Klux Klan today in the States. Like, who would imagine that in the 60s?
Yeah, I mean, I remember in this, like, what was it? 2015 or 2014, there was these like KKK or alt-right marches in like the
Yeah.
Carolinas. Oh man, it was
And this
shocking.
is like reactionary. This is like reactionary politics, like reacting to the leftist identity politics. Like, we should like leave liberalism. Like the liberals, like all the Joe Bidens of the world, they should do like their own thing. Like we shouldn't care. We shouldn't care about the liberals because the liberals have only brought us like more inequality, more chaos, more like social instability. Like we don't need them.
I mean, my interpretation of the kind of identity politics is that on the one hand, it's very, very difficult to have real measurable goals, or not that, but like to like measure the results in a way, because it's so much about like attitude towards treating people.
Yeah.
That because of that core, it's kind of hard to like concretize what the movement like materially can accomplish or should accomplish. I mean, of course, you could say like, awareness, better treatment, more compassion, more acceptance of particular groups, A, maybe. But you can't legislate that. You can't force people to do that.
No,
of course, the discourse does work.
I mean, now it's completely ridiculous, right? Because in every form you fill in the States, you have to fill in your race and your gender, which are like, this is fake. Like race and gender are like social constructs. Why do we need to fill up like these like fake social constructs in government papers? It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes from the liberals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why?
It's almost like they'd never read the Cyborg Manifesto from Donna Haraway, which says exactly this. That like actually, I mean, she's coming from the 70s away to unite different branches of feminism that were a bit like fighting.
Yeah.
To say like, actually, we're all these cyborg like constructed identities from so many different sources. Why can't we unify around this?
Yeah.
Our patchwork nature of identity, for example.
Exactly. But also, like, this is a social thing. It doesn't need to be controlled by the government. Why do we give the government more power over the way we identify ourselves? This is so stupid.
I think this is an issue that should be raised. And for me, what I've seen in, between like 2012, when I became a bit more aware of these issues, when I went to university, I ended high school, and then now is a lot of the times, a big corporation can just appropriate the terms, slap some diversity in their advertising, and continue their activities as normal. And I don't think that accomplishes much.
Yeah, and this is also the reason the right is, the political right is winning, because they already understood that neoliberalism doesn't fall through on their promises. They lie to us, and they rob our money, and they rob our resources, and they completely crumble society, and like society is way more fragile than it used to be. And the right understand this, and I think if the left wants to be in power again, they have to reject neoliberalism.
I think this is why it's in a way important to take people from the right seriously, very, very seriously what they say, because they're reacting to something very real. And it's a very honest way of reacting. From my perspective, they choose the wrong solutions.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm hearing Steve Bannon, and like when he talks about the facts, like he doesn't say anything that is false, just like his interpretation of reality is like completely strange. Like I don't think the Great Replacement is a thing, right? Like I don't think the elites actually want to replace like white people with immigrants, but like in practice we see that this is what is happening, and if we don't want this to happen, we need to think of like viable solutions.
Yes, for me, this has personally been a point where I have a hard time kind of like identifying so strongly with a lot of like popular leftist discourse, because I feel like they oftentimes rely so much on moral arguments that I find a lack of pragmatic solutions. And I think we need them. We need to incentivize people to, I don't know, find alternative forms of social organization or government state organization, or find a way where a kind of post-state organization of society can really work within an economy that incentivizes people to do things.
Yeah, I think the post-state part is the important part.
This is a crazy
I think
issue.
people don't trust the state. They don't trust the elites.
Yep.
And I think this is actually the unifying thing. Like this is the way to unify left and right. This is the way you can unify people against this like concentration of power and resources within like the 1% that Bernie was talking. I mean,
the 99%.
yeah, I mean, but there's no major difference between Steve Bannon and Bernie Sanders. They're talking about the same thing. Bernie called it the 1%. Steve Bannon called it the elites, but it's the same thing. Like, and once we understand that we're on the same side, we could actually get some viable solutions for the future of like most of society.
This is interesting. I mean, Zizek talks about the unholy alliances, where you have like, different sectors of society that would never come together to kind of create these monstrosities that would produce something even more sinister. But maybe this is a way of creating a holy, unholy alliance. That
A holy, unholy alliance.
okay, maybe, you have to, listen to more country music, and there's some guy from rural Ohio, very American example, some, working class person from rural Ohio or deep Alabama who, when they speak about things, you're just like, wow, I'm going to try to be respectful for the internet. I completely disagree with a few, curse words inserted.
Yeah.
But to then team up somehow, maybe there is something, I don't know. Maybe this is impossible and it's such a classic leftist idea. I prefer to not think that way, but
It's impossible as long as people stay on social media.
I agree. I think that the biggest effect of social media is polarization.
Yep.
And complete deconstruction of communication processes.
Yep.
Because you have no way to respond as a human being.
Yeah.
You are given an algorithm and you have to you're forced to respond as an algorithm. Because the way that social media works is that it rewards the most affective, most viscerally powerful things, which are absolutely bad for discourse. Because, you see first, like, horrible images and you're like, oh my God, or you see the headline, you're like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And you can't respond to individual people in the flesh who you see and you have to smell and maybe taste, I don't know, and realize that they're complex beings with complex inner lives who are empathetic. We'll see. I don't think so many good things about that.
To holy, unholy alliances.
To unholy alliances. Delicious.
On this note, I think we're done with episode 9.
The cod has been passed of the podcast.
The pod has been cast, exactly. Yes. Episode 1 of Guy's Trip. A podcast of the artists, for the artists, and by the artists.
And I didn't even ask you the street food question or the soup and salad question.
You can ask me after the podcast.
Okay, after the podcast.
Okay, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next time.
Bye,
Goodbye.
Internet.